Good morning. This is Roger Royce from the Royce Law Firm in Menlo Park, California. Thank you for signing in and welcome to our webinar today. This is part of a series. It's been a while since we've done a webinar, but now we're back and we're kicking it off with a program on immigration today. Our guest speaker is Sophie Alcorn. She is an immigration lawyer here in Silicon Valley with Alcorn Immigration Law, and she's going to talk about immigration law, especially for startups and for founders. And here in Silicon Valley, of course, as you know, probably most companies that start here are from outside the United States. Almost everybody is from someplace else, and there are constant questions around immigration status that come up again and again when foreign founders start a company here or bring their company to the Silicon Valley. And we're really glad to have Sophie here today to talk with us about some of those immigration issues. You'll notice that you have a dialog box in your screen for questions. Go ahead, type your questions in. We'll have time at the end, hopefully, to get through them and maybe even during the presentation. And if we don't, certainly you can follow up with Sophie afterwards. She'll leave her contact information on the screen. Again, this is part of a series, so stay tuned. We're going to be doing more of these down the road, but today we're going to start off with immigration issues. And with that, Sophie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Roger, and thank you so much to Royce Law. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm grateful that you host this series of educational webinars for founders. That's wonderful. There are so many questions that international founders have, or founders of international companies, when it comes to all sorts of things. So I'll be talking about the immigration aspects today, but you guys are always such a great source of information for corporate formation, questions about the entity, tax implications, questions about raising funding from venture capitalists. So I'm really grateful to be here in conjunction with you. So we have an hour, and I want to make this as interactive and useful for all of our participants as possible. I have a lot of material. I could talk about this for days, but that's not the point. The point here is to really focus on these learning goals for you. So some of the things we'll be talking about are how to come here temporarily, how to move here permanently and get a green card, which would eventually enable you to become a citizen if you want to spend a long time in the United States, how to bring your employees over, how you can do all of this yourself if you're the founder and you need help because you're not a US citizen, everything you need to know for your international employees and different red flags to look out for. So it's a lot of information to cover in 45 minutes. I'm going to give you an overview. We'll dive into a few concepts in more depth, and I am taking a look at the chat window through the GoToWebinar screen. So if you have questions, if you need anything clarified, please let me know. I'll reserve time for questions at the end, probably about 15 minutes. But if you need anything clarified as I'm talking about a particular topic, don't hesitate to ask. I'll be happy to answer your questions. I want to make this as useful for you as possible. So this is me. I'm a certified specialist in U.S. Immigration and Nationality Law through the State Bar of California, Board of Legal Specialization. So that's like an extra bar exam, peer review process, hundreds of cases, different specialty areas. Very familiar with immigration law. I write for TechCrunch about immigration, and we've helped thousands of people around the world, mostly from startups and people who are technology professionals, to successfully navigate the U.S. immigration law system. The reason I really love working with founders of startups is because I love technology. I love thinking about how we can change the world for the better together. And I'm an entrepreneur myself. So the reason I got into immigration is because of my family's background. This was my great grandfather, John Grana. This is his official certificate of citizenship from the 1940s, I think, and it shows how he came to the United States through his dad around 1910. And he was an Italian immigrant from Sicily. He ended up in Chicago, where my family lived, and he was a young man in the 1920s. So if I think of Sicilians in Chicago in the 1920s, I think of Al Capone and the mafia. Don't really know what he was up to, except he did have his distinguishing marks were that his right arm was bent and his thumb was broken, and that made it onto his certificate of citizenship. So I can only wonder what he was up to, but I think it had something to do with illegal liquor runs into Canada during Prohibition, when there was no alcohol involved in the United States, and he would bring back barrels of whiskey to all the doctors and lawyers and judges in the town. So that's, you know, the beginning of my family's immigration story to the US as I understand it. But, you know, it also continued with my mom and dad. My mom is an immigrant from Germany, and my dad was her immigration lawyer. So this is in my blood. And I'm an entrepreneur because I went from being a stay-at-home mom with 2 little kids in Mountain View, you know, looking outside my window, cleaning up baby food and thinking, you know, I'm in Silicon Valley. All those startups are so close, but they're so far away. Being a mom is a really hard job. So much respect for anybody who can manage to do it full time. I could not, and I decided to start a law firm instead. And I'm proud to say that my kids are happy and healthy and proud of me from, you know, helping people from all over the world. So the mission of what we do at my law firm, Alcorn Immigration Law, is to overcome borders, expand opportunity, and connect the world by practicing compassionate, cutting edge, and rigorous immigration law in service of the betterment of humanity. And this is, you know, a really lofty, idealistic goal. And I'm super proud to say that by focusing on this and focusing on our clients as individual people with needs, where we really, you know, get to know our clients and understand them and their goals, has allowed us to create very tailored strategies for each person. And so even in the current Trump administration with more stringent immigration standards, we're still winning the vast majority of our cases. So I'm really proud that doing the right thing also leads to winning. This is our office. We're in Mountain View. We had a big ribbon cutting ceremony when we moved here about a year ago. We have a team from all over the world. We're all deeply connected to immigration, either immigrants ourselves, children of immigrants, married to immigrants. We really get it. We really, really get it. This is at the government where they have citizenship and green card interviews in San Jose. So a lot of our clients who are, you know, in Silicon Valley end up having their interviews here or in San Francisco. And wherever possible, we always go with our clients to their immigration interviews because, you know, we're in this together. We don't want you to feel like you're alone. We've done this thousands of times, and we know how it works. So our job is to help our clients get through it smoothly. We also have a friendly office dog named Willie who comes and helps us. He's a great support for our clients when he's in the office because we realize, you know, this can be stressful for you. So our job is to make it easier. And I also have this slide to show just like this is a paper-based system still. The government really has not been able to do very much to digitize the immigration process. And that's a difference for a lot of tech founders. You know, if you're used to running everything through email and Slack and Google Drive and everything online from a coffee shop, it's kind of different when all of a sudden you have to like actually sign a form with an ink pen and mail it somewhere. So if you're planning on going through this process, I just need to prepare you. It's not digital, and there's a lot of paperwork involved, but it's totally manageable. So yeah, we're really excited to help our clients, and we've helped a lot of really cool founders and companies from all over the world. Lots of really great investors are choosing our clients' companies. SoftBank just led a round for one of them that was almost $500 million. So we love that. We work a lot with Y Combinator and 500 startups. So yeah, it's super fun and awesome to see all of your ideas and what you're working on and what you want to bring, you know, to the market in the United States, the technologies you're inventing. A lot of our clients are also, you know, already in the Bay Area, and they are thinking of leaving these companies to start their own startups. So they need to take their immigration situation into their own hands, and we can definitely help with that as well. And I just love, you know, working with brilliant people from all over the world who are working on really cool ideas. And I'm really proud that we've also won a lot of awards in the space for the work that we're doing, and been in the newspapers a lot. And I just got invited to speak at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco and Berlin on this topic. So I'm really excited about that as well. Cool. So with that, we are now going to focus on the meat of this webinar. So what do founders need to know about immigration? So I see a question already. Thank you. That's very exciting. Let's see what this said. Now, how do I do it? All right. I don't know. For some reason, I can't see the whole question. That's okay. I see that there's a question from somebody in Poland with a question about immigration. So during the presentation, I'll work on viewing your whole question, and then at the end, if I haven't answered it, please let me know and I will be happy to address it. So the first thing that I'd like everybody to know is what's the high level overview, right? So a lot of people, because like what's required? What is a necessary condition to moving here? What are the steps? So ultimately, if your goal one day is to become a US citizen and to vote and, you know, be able to participate on a jury and live here for the rest of your life and work here, and you're always okay with paying US taxes, then, you know, that's citizenship. And that's a one-day goal that you can achieve. Now, in the meantime, there are two other preceding steps that you might want to consider. So if you want to become a citizen, you have to have a green card first. That's permanent residence. And once you get a green card, you're allowed to live here for the rest of your life. And then it's your choice about if you ever want to go apply for citizenship. And a lot of people, before they get a green card, you know, a green card can take a couple of years. So they want to move here first and move here more quickly, so they come on a temporary visa. And that's usually the way that a startup founder would come here to build their company, start living here and start working here. And then once they get that, and then they can travel in and out, then we would start the green card process for them. But sometimes founders are very comfortable in their current country where they're living in. They have a spouse, young children, and they don't want to uproot their family until they're totally confident that they can just live here for the rest of their lives and get green cards. So if that speaks to you, know that you can start the green card process from another country without ever having lived here, visited here first. And so if you prefer to just move here in a couple of years when everything is totally, you know, secured with the green card, then you could do that as well. In general, our immigration system has 4 ways of living here and working here and staying here. The categories are either employment sponsorship, family sponsorship, There's a lottery for green cards. There's also a lottery for work visas, which we'll talk about. And so the employment requires somebody to generally petition you. The family requires somebody to petition you. The lottery you can do by yourself. And then there are a few categories that you might qualify for where you can sponsor yourself for a visa or a green card. So if any of you come here as visitors, this is important for a lot of early stage startup founders or a lot of people in other countries with established companies who are thinking of setting up US operations. There are two ways to come here as visitors. Either you have ESTA, which is a 90-day visa waiver program if you are from certain countries, or you can come here with a B1, B2 visitor visa. Now, the B1 is for visiting on a business trip. The B2 is for visiting on a tourism trip. So you get a visa for both and you select which option you want when you come in. If you do that with ESTA, you'll either have WT, waiver tourism, or WB, waiver business. The key thing is that if you're coming here to, work with Roger and incorporate your company and set up an office, don't tell them you're here as a tourist. Please tell them you're here on business as either WB for ESTA or B1 for the visa. I have seen that come back to bite a founder many years later. So please be clear about your purpose. And the other thing that's super important is you're not allowed to work when you're in the United States on one of these categories. But what you can do is start your business, incorporate it, get the Delaware corporation set up, get it registered in California, look around for an office, maybe hire one person who's going to be the manager in the US. You can enter into negotiations, you can pitch VCs, but you can't be employed here. You can't be doing like professional or administrative work for your company while you're in the US. And you certainly cannot be paid in the US. That would all violate these statuses and potentially bar you from coming here in the future. So when you're coming here, you will get an I-94 stamp in your passport that lets you know how long you can stay. Please check that. There's a way to also confirm online that what is in your passport that they hand wrote matches what's in their online database. So whenever you come here on a trip, it's a good idea to go to this website and check to just make sure that everything lines up. If there are any errors in their records, you can let us know. That's something we can help clear up, but you just want everything to be consistent and correct. There's also a difference between how long your visa is valid for and how long you can stay. These are two different things. So sometimes people get a 10-year multiple entry visa where they can come for 6 months at a time. That's like a B1, B2. But if you're from Iran, it might be a 6-month visa valid. Well, you can't even come here anymore if you're from Iran. But for some countries, they do issue, visas that are only valid for 6 months and for one trip. Sometimes the visa, is about to expire, but when you come in, you can still stay for 2 years, even though the visa expired. So there's a lot of different categories. Make sure you know whatever applies to you. If you're inside the US, you're dealing with the Department of Homeland Security within the government for your immigration things. If you're outside the US, then you would be doing everything with the State Department at an embassy or a consulate. There's also an important distinction between your intention in your mind when you're coming here to visit. Some categories are only for non-immigrants, and so that would be like a student, an exchange visitor, a tourist, and if the government officers at your visa interview or at the airport have any indication that you might be making permanent plans to stay here, that you might intend to be immigrating to the United States, they could deny your visa, they could deny you entry. So, sorting that out and preparing our clients for how to discuss the truth of their plans in a way that's legally viable, is something that we also help our clients do. We already talked about how you can either come here permanently on a visa or stay, temporarily on a visa or stay permanently and get a green card. And if you're getting your visa or your green card in another country, that's called consular processing. And if you are changing your status or getting a green card through the adjustment of process status inside the United States, those procedures happen with U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is a part of the Department of Homeland Security. So one of the trends going on is something called extreme vetting. This is one of Trump's executive orders from about 2 years ago. And so basically what this means is everybody who is coming to the United States is getting really thoroughly screened. People's visas, if there's a hit on your name in the background check, you could get stuck in administrative processing awaiting your visa. Also, if you're renewing a visa, they treat it as strictly as an initial visa application. So there is heightened security right now under the Trump administration. And, don't be stressed out if you find the immigration law process for the US to be complex or stressful because you've been trying to read about visas on online, wiki pages, message boards, self-help groups. It is super complex. Just know that. It's one of the most complicated types of law. A lot of judges say it's as complicated as tax law, if not more. So just, take a deep breath. This is something that it's good to have a lawyer help you with to just make sure it goes smoothly. And so what we do, the way we help our clients is, we always create an individual personalized strategy. Then there is in-depth preparation. Often, it takes our clients, we'll set a personalized strategy. We will give them a checklist of the information and documents we need. It often takes our clients, 2 to sometimes 6 or 8 weeks to obtain all the information and provide it to us. And then, it's our turn to put all of the documents together. And then we file everything with the government. We track it. We make sure that the government hasn't made an error, that it was actually received, that it hasn't gotten lost, that it's being adjudicated on time. And then about 95% of the time, and I think that's going up, but we have been winning. Although, of course, I can't guarantee that for anybody. Okay, so exploring your options, exploring the options. There are a lot of ways to come to the United States. So I've prepared this infographic, which I will be sharing with Royce Law so that they can distribute it to all of our attendees after this webinar. So you will have it. It's a document that explores the different ways to come here through investment, through transferring from one branch of your company in another country to here, by being an expert in your field, through a normal standard work visa process, by doing something that's in the US national interest. There are a lot of ways to stay. That is what we are going to be talking about today, and then I will be sharing this with all of you for later. So often the first question is, how can I work in the United States temporarily? So there are many, many options, and I'm going to briefly go through them. So certain countries have access to an E1 visa, which is if you are exchanging goods or services primarily between the United States and your home country. That could potentially work in software, but it doesn't work for a lot of startups that want to have really global reach. So there's another version, which is if you are a citizen of a certain country and you're investing, or the parent company in another country is investing money to create a new subsidiary in the United States. So here are the countries that currently qualify for this investor treaty visa. It's not India, it's not China, it is Iran, but you would already have to be in the United States to qualify. The red, Israel and New Zealand, they recently became added. We signed treaties and passed laws to allow them to be part of this visa scheme as well. So if you are on this list and you're creating a startup in the US, if we can show that you are putting like $100,000 to $200,000 of your own capital at risk into the US operation, then you could potentially get this visa. You can come here and run the company. It's typically valid for 5 years. You can stay up to 2 years at a time. Your spouse can get a work permit. And if you don't have like $100,000 in your own name, or it's not like a, you know, for example, you could have a Mexican parent company opening up a subsidiary in the United States, and that transfers the $200,000. That would count too. If you don't have that type of money in your own personal possession or a company to do it, then we could also explore valuing your company and your intellectual property and making the argument that your investment into the company that you're putting at risk is your IP. So that's another creative strategy that we do sometimes for startup founders in this area. Now, if you're not from one of those countries, what else can you do to come here? So the O1 visa is for people with extraordinary ability. It applies to people from all over the world, any country. And what we have to show is that you are at the very top of your field or subfield in a particular country or in the world. And we do that by showing your awards, you know, press coverage, your inventions. This does require a job offer from your US company. So it's helpful to have an independent board of directors or another major shareholder who can offer you the position. And when we break it down, the way we show this more specifically is that you meet 3 out of 8 criteria on a list, and then you get a bunch of letters of recommendation about you. So here are the 8 categories that you need at least 3 of to qualify for an O1 visa. It can include prizes like if you were in, and so it could be like the Korean government gave you the award for the best humanitarian startup of 2018, for example. That would be a typical award. We can also use venture capital investment as a prize as well. So, you know, if Sequoia is leading your Series A with a $5 million investment, we would use that in this category as well. Another category is membership. The way that applies most commonly to startup founders is, have you been invited to be in any organizations for being an expert entrepreneur? Or are you in software and you have a particular expertise in some maybe open source technologies, so you've been invited to be on a steering committee for that? Or, you know, do you participate in an incubator or an accelerator as a mentor? We can be creative about this. We also look at what articles have been written about you or the company that you founded. What are your major business contributions? You know, have you, are there patents for your technology? Are you, you know, leading your industry or your market with your company? The 5th would be authorship. Are you a thought leader? Have you written either academic papers or papers even on a website like Medium? If we can show that you have a really high readership, that can count too. They could also look at money. Have you been paid a lot, or is your company worth a lot? Judging, have you been invited to judge startup pitch competitions or other types of competitions? And then, have you been a leader or played a critical role in a distinguished organization? And a lot of startups with emerging technologies would be would be distinguished organizations. So that is how we typically look at this O visa for extraordinary ability. And it's initially valid for 3 years, then you get 1-year extensions. So people pretty soon usually want to get a green card after they get this. One drawback is that if you're married, your spouse is not eligible for a work permit. However, your spouse can come, and with all of these, your kids can come as well, and they are counted as kids until they are 21 years old, although they cannot get work permits, but that's great. Okay, so next visa type that you guys all need to know about, and this would be really important if you already have a company set up in a country besides the US, and you're thinking of coming here either to open a subsidiary and explore selling your product in the US market, or if you have a startup in another country and you're deciding to come here and raise venture capital funds. Something you can talk to Roger about is if you need to make your foreign company the subsidiary so that the US investors will invest in your US parent company. And so you need the US, like a Delaware corporation, to own your foreign company back home. That's called a Delaware flip. And if you get a certain amount of investment, then it's probably a great idea to talk to Roger about doing that so that the investors are confident that their money is going into the US entity. Anyway, all of those variations work for the L1A visa. You just need to show there's a foreign company, there's a US company, they're related, and you've worked for the foreign company for at least 1 year out of the last 3 years. It's so great if you've been on payroll and you can just show payroll records of your employment and being employed consistently. If you've spent significant time on business in the United States, we can't count your time in the US towards that 1 year, but any trips just pause the clock. They don't restart the clock. So we cumulatively look at your time within the last 3 years to make sure you've spent at least 1 year working for that company outside of the United States. And then you can come here. And the L1A is for a manager or an executive role in the United States. There's also a variation maybe for your employees called an L1B, which is if you have specialized knowledge. You're allowed to come for typically 3 years at the beginning, and up to 7 years total for an executive or manager, or 5 years for the L1B for specialized knowledge. If it's a brand new company, if it's a startup, and you don't have any operations in the United States, then we would typically request a 1 year initial stay for a startup. And one of the nice things about this visa is that if you have a spouse who wants to work in the United States, your spouse will be eligible for a work permit in an L1A. Okay, now if anybody is attending the webinar and has an H-1B already because you're employed at a company, there is a way that we can transfer your H-1B so that you can be employed at the startup that you're a co-founder of. This is a working visa. If you're not in that situation, this might be relevant for you if you're planning on hiring international professionals in the United States, because they might want H-1B sponsorship to work at your company. It's a working visa for professionals. It's usually 3 years at a time, up to 6 years total. There is a lottery for new people to get this every year. The thing we want to be really careful about and have a conversation about the strategy for is if you're the founder and you want to transfer your H-1B to your new startup, we have to make sure that we're setting up everything right at the beginning so that you have a proper employer-employee relationship with this company. If you are from Canada or Mexico, there's a special visa for those countries called TN, and this cannot work for startup founders because they're very strict on zero self-employment being possible as the H-1B. But if you ever need to hire anybody from these countries, it's good to know there's a list of about 30 countries, 30 professions that can qualify somebody from Canada or Mexico to work for your company in the United States. So just to recap, there are these special visas for Canada and Mexico. There are also special visas for Australia, Chile, and Singapore. So once again, this is more for employees, not for founders, but if you want to hire people from those countries, it's easier than other countries because of the particular historical relationships with each of those countries in the United States. Like Australia, it was their reward for sending troops to the Persian Gulf War in the early 90s. So that's a very brief overview of the most common non-immigrant temporary visa options for people in early stage startups. But then there's also the question of, okay, that's great. I want to come, I want to work, we'll just deal with it whether my spouse can work or not, but we're ready to move. But long-term, how can we stay in the United States? So that's the green card question. And I'll give you a brief overview of the green card categories. So I'm not really going to focus on the diversity green card lottery. It's a free application online. It happens annually. So if you're from a country with a low level of immigration to the United States, sure, put yourself on the list. Maybe you'll be selected for that. There are also ways to get green cards through family members. So if any of you are in love with or married to a US citizen in a good faith marriage, let's have that conversation. It's a lot shorter of a process than doing this through employment or doing this based on your expertise or even your investment. But know that it's critical that it's a good faith marriage, and they will check, and you only get a green card for 2 years initially, and then they want to make sure that you're still married and everything was in good faith, so they check that. Okay, so some of you, if you're thinking about leaving another company to go create a startup and you're already in the US, then you may have experienced this green card process, the EB2, employment-based second preference green card for people with advanced degrees, and EB3, which is for skilled workers. To get that green card, the employer first has to go through a process called PERM, where the company is recruiting to see if there are any qualified Americans who can do this job instead of the intending immigrant. And if there are Americans, then the person can't get a green card. So that's like the standard default process that most people are familiar with and that most companies do for their employees. But it doesn't really work for startup founders because there's a conflict of interest between the recruiting process and owning a high amount of equity when you want a green card for yourself. So we look at other options. So there's the EB5 green card. If you have $500,000, I would say do this ASAP. The financial amounts will be increasing in November, so the $500,000 level will shoot up by $400,000 to be $900,000, and the $1 million level is going to go to $1.8 million. Basically, at $500,000, you can either be a passive investor and put your money into somebody else's regional center, or you can locate your own company in a targeted employment area that is either rural or has a high amount of unemployment, and you have to create 10 jobs for Americans. This also, it's a long process. The backlogs for India and China, for China it's already very high, for India it's starting. And you get a 2-year green card with this, and then once they're satisfied that you've made the investment and you've hired the people, then you can get the full-fledged permanent green card with no conditions. So if the L1A visa was right for you as a international manager or executive, then after your company has been doing work for at least 1 year in the United States, then you can be sponsored for a green card for multinational executives and managers. It's the EB1C category. It's the first preference. You don't have to do any recruiting of Americans for this category. But it's kind of a slow process. There's nothing, premium processing, which is like an added speed up service that the government has, is not available for this category. So it will probably take 2 to 3 years to get a green card in this category, but that can be started after you come here. Now, if the O1A visa was proper for you for extraordinary ability, then once you have that, you could consider getting an EB1A green card. You could also do this just, based out of whatever country you're living in right now. And it's very similar, except there's 10 criteria instead of 8 criteria, because artists can do this as well. And it's very similar with the letters of recommendation and showing how you're at the very top of your field to do this. But with the O1A and the EB1A, that's why you choose a good lawyer who can argue this for you. It's subjective, and part of what needs to happen is, so let me phrase it this way. We get to define your field of business. And so let's say you have a physical therapy IoT company in Italy, right? That, maybe like wearables in Italy is your field. And since it's a very new technology and it's a small country, there might be a very strong argument that you are the leader in it. There's probably not a lot of competition in most of the things that people are coming to Silicon Valley to do. So those are all things we take a look at and strategize about. If you don't quite meet those 3 out of 10 criteria, there's still a way for you to get a green card. It's an employment-based second preference green card, so you're supposed to have a master's degree or equivalent accomplishments, but there's no perm here because perm is waived from a national interest waiver, so that's the NIW. So basically, we answer the question of how does America need you? What are you going to do for the country? What will your technology do? What will your company do? Are you creating jobs for Americans? Are you improving healthcare for Americans? So a lot of ways to do that. Sometimes, I would just say no companies that are vices. We probably can't make the argument for those. Okay, so once you have had a green card for 5 years, then you can apply for citizenship. So if that's one of your goals in life, then it's possible. Get a green card first. If you're married to a US citizen, then you only need to have your green card for 3 years in order to qualify. You'll have to spend at least half of that time physically in the United States and be a person of good moral character. There's an interview, there's a test. A related question that I often get is, if I get a green card, how much time do I have to stay in the US? So if you want to become a citizen 50% of the time, if you're not planning on applying for citizenship immediately, then you just have to make sure that you keep living here. You can take trips. You can be gone typically up to 6 months on any given trip. If you need to be gone longer, then there's a special permit we can get you in advance. But generally 50% of the time is a good rule of thumb, although that's not required to maintain your permanent residence. Okay, so when you're considering going through this process, then things you want to think about are your time. This takes time. It takes your time to work with an attorney, to provide all the documents, to fill out questionnaires, to review forms.
For some visa categories like the H-1B or an employment-based green card for an employee, there will be a minimum prevailing wage that needs to be met. So if you're really early stage and you don't have any money, you might not be able to do that. There are also government filing fees. Those are typically on the order of $1,000 to $5,000. They're flat fees. You pay them at the time of filing. The government charges that to process the application. There's legal fees for your attorneys. Most immigration law firms, us ourselves included, typically charge on a project basis or a flat fee basis, so you know exactly what it's going to be from start to finish. A visa or a step of a green card would typically be on the order of $2,000 to $9,000 typically. Sometimes, very occasionally, some work is billed hourly, but that's the exception, not the rule. Something to be aware of is the government is sending more requests for additional evidence, so that's a stage you might reach after they are reviewing it. And you may also need to get your education or work experience evaluated or get translations. And then for some categories, you can speed up the government and their processing time by paying an extra $1,400 and requesting premium processing. So I do also have this article called What Everyone in a Startup Needs to Know About Immigration, which I will also share with Roger and Royce Law to share with you after the webinar. So you're all welcome to take a look at that. You're always welcome to email us, to call us, schedule a consultation. So happy to help. We'll often email you a questionnaire in advance so we can get the information we need to understand what you might qualify for or what your questions are so that we can best give you the help that you need. So with that, I would like to invite all of you to ask more questions. I do see the question from Poland, and I don't know, Alan or Roger, if you could help me read that, that would be great, because for some reason I can't scroll. But there we go. Maybe it's working. What? Oh, thank you. Here's a question. I can read this one for some reason. What is my background prior to starting my firm that makes me an expert in immigration law? I guess I didn't really go into that. So it's a family business. My dad was an immigration lawyer, and I started going to his office when I was, in preschool. And I've been doing this, working in immigration law firms since I had my first job when I was 14. I've, sent faxes about immigration law and typed things on typewriters about immigration law and researched things in books before the internet was invented. I worked for my dad throughout high school, throughout college, throughout law school. So, and I've been practicing immigration law for 11 years. I'm a certified specialist in immigration. It's a very rare designation. There's only 2 people that have that in Santa Clara County, which is where Silicon Valley is. I've done, I've helped thousands of people and businesses successfully navigate to the United States, and I'm an award-winning published author on the topic. So thank you for that question. Glad you asked it. And let me see if I can get the other questions loaded so I can help you guys more. Oh, here we go. I found the right pop-out menu. Wonderful. Okay. So thank you very much for that question. Okay. Next question. This is from somebody named Ricky. So thank you, Ricky. This is, does the money invested in the company for the E2 need to come from another country? No, it doesn't actually. So let's say you're living in the United States, you're a German citizen, you're employed at Facebook, you're on an H-1B visa and you've saved up $200,000 from your employment at Facebook, you have it in a US checking account and you want to use it to start your new company and get an E-2 visa, totally fine. We just need to show that the new company is owned at least 51% by people from Germany, and that you personally possess the money and that you're actually spending it and putting it at risk so that you could lose it. That's the biggest thing about the E-2 visa, is this chicken and egg problem. So a lot of founders, well, a lot of small business owners are afraid to spend their money before they get the visa, but the government isn't going to issue you a visa unless you've spent like 60K at least, I would say. So thank you so much for that question. Next question, do we work with small businesses, not startups? Absolutely, absolutely. Our main focus is in the technology space, but small businesses are easier to help than startups from a government perspective, because to the government, you know, startups are like newfangled and weird and don't have revenue and don't have real offices, and so we have to navigate all of that. But yeah, if you're a small business, would love to help you. It's a lot easier than everything I'm talking about on this webinar, so thank you. Okay, and then next, there's a question from Ravi. This is about an L1 visa. And the question is, for an L1 visa, is 10 employees in the US compulsory? If a startup raises $1 million from investors, but not 10 employees, can the founder get an L1 visa? So I think you're conflating two different things. The EB-5 green card, which requires you to personally put in, you know, the standard version would be you put in your own $1 million to start a new company in the US and you hire 10 employees. That's the EB-5 green card. And then there's the L1 visa. No, it is not compulsory to have 10 employees in the US. That's something people are saying as a good rule of thumb because it seems to mean you have a stronger case, but it's not required. There's other ways to prove that. So you don't need 10 employees to get an L1 visa. And then related to that, you said if a startup raises $1 million from investors but doesn't have 10 employees, can the founder get an L1 visa? Yes, yes, I'm very confident that we can do that. I mean, we'll have to show your business plan, we'll have to show what you're going to be doing, but yeah, you would definitely worth exploring that more because it's probably a good option for you, Robbie. Okay, so then we had another question from, okay, we helped you guys. Okay, here we go. This is from Bharat from the beginning. Thank you, Bharat. This question is, you're at a startup from Europe, performing business for over 3 years with significant revenue, but no employees, and you operate only with freelancers. Is there a path to a green card? Interesting. So if you're currently in Poland running a startup that doesn't have employees, is there a path? Yeah, I mean, I think we should have a conversation about, you know, what is your business plan for the United States? How soon do you want to come here? Is there a way to expand your operations into the United States? What would that do for the US economy? What are your accomplishments? So we would send you our questionnaire about your accomplishments and your abilities and your successes, and we would evaluate you for the EB-1A green card or the EB-2 national interest waiver green card. One thing to note is that the government has different wait times in each of those categories depending on the country you were born in and not the country you're a citizen of. So if you were born in India but you're a permanent resident or citizen of Slovenia, you're still going to be put in the Indian category unless they change the law. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. All right, so then we have another more questions. Okay, we helped Rod, we helped Ricky, we talked about my background. We do help small businesses, not just startups.
Ooh, lots of questions. Okay, 5 more minutes. Keep the questions coming. I'll try to answer whatever I can in the next 5 minutes. So Ricky asks, can founders apply for a green card after the E2? Yes, you can. When you are applying for an E2 visa, if you have the absolute intention to live here for the rest of your lives, you would not qualify for an E2 visa, because when you get an E2, you have to sign a certification that you have a residence in your home country that you have no intention of abandoning. So what I tell people is like, look, you know, we can talk about it and one day you could decide that. But at the point when you're doing an E2 application, you cannot have, you know, manifested that firm intention yet. But yes, there are ways, you know, if you're already on an E2, there are ways to get a green card. We would explore the same categories if you're a founder. So EB1A for extraordinary ability, EB2 national interest waiver, depending on what country you're coming from and what you're doing would be good for the United States. So that is definitely something to explore. Okay, and then we have another question from Luke about what visa would you recommend for an accelerator lasting 4 months? And thank you for your time. Thank you, Luke, for your question. So I get this question a lot because people are coming to Techstars and YC and 500 and country specific, you know, like the German accelerator. So there's a lot of different programs that people come to. If it's 4 months and you're from Western Europe, or you're from a country that allows you to have ESTA, the temptation is to have ESTA, but ESTA is limited to only 90 days, and it's super sketchy and risky if you're, you know, trying to pop over to Canada or Mexico. They're not supposed to let you back in, or they don't restart the 90 days. So, like if you want to be gone from the accelerator for a month in the middle and you want to go back to your home country, then maybe ESTA would work. But basically what I would advise is if you have the time, if there's time until the accelerator starts, go get yourself a B1, B2 visitor visa. It's a lot better. You'll be allowed to stay for up to 6 months. You still can't work in the United States, but you're allowed to build your business, make contacts, pitch the company, talk to investors. So those activities would be okay with a B1, B2 visa. So that's what I would recommend. And if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to talk to you about it. Great questions, everybody. Thank you so much. It's been fun for me. I love it when I get questions because it's great to engage with all of you. There's like 1 minute left if anybody wants to get in a last minute question. Oh, there's more questions. All right. What is the path for a founder in OPT to F1 visa to a green card? Okay, if you're from China or India, you probably have to get an H1B or an O1A first as a bridge. An H1B is better because you can renew it less frequently, and if you have a green card pending, it can last forever. So if you're not from India or China or a country with a long backlog, you could potentially get your company to just sponsor you for a green card before OPT is over. With the current wait times and green cards taking 2 to 3 years, I'm suggesting, basically do the H1B lottery every single year and in parallel start the green card process as soon as possible, and that will minimize any gap that you have to spend outside of the United States after OPT and before your green card if you don't get an H1B. But we have to talk more about your company and the ownership structure for that. Okay, and then the final question is, am I aware of any amnesty type programs? Yeah, so the original amnesty was in 1986 when President Reagan legalized hundreds of thousands or millions of people who were living here without permission. There's nothing for that right now. They keep talking about it, but it's not happening. There's something called DACA if you were, brought here as a child without permission. But really, there's not. If you think you violated your status, definitely talk to an immigration lawyer before you leave the country,
because if you leave, you might not be allowed back in, and maybe there's something we can do if you stay. And then final question, O1A awards, lots of awards count. If you have awards, tell me about them. Student awards are not okay. Money, prizes, there are always, to pitch those things as being awards. So, okay, with that, I have to wrap up. Thank you so much to everybody for participating. We covered a lot of ground. I'm so grateful to Roger Royce and Royce Law for sponsoring and hosting this webinar. We'll be making that options chart and the TechCrunch article available to all of you. Let me know if you have any questions. You're always welcome to get in touch with us and mention this webinar, and we'll be happy to help you. So with that, I thank you so much for your time and attention and presence today.
Okay, thank you, Sophie. And with that, we're going to conclude the webinar.